Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. We always have to do that because shit breaks so often.
We just had technical difficulties. It was my fault. Headphones weren't plugged in.
I wish we were recording whenever that took place. When you're running around looking at your interface and
Oh,
the
man.
settings on your computer and turning shit up and down, and I can hear you just complaining about how nothing ever works ever. It's always something, and then you look down and your headphones are unplugged. So I guess we can't blame the equipment this week. It was a user error on our part this
Yeah.
time around.
Well, if the equipment wasn't made the way it was, I wouldn't have unplugged them.
Yeah, we really need like a really high fidelity wireless headphone situation for this, so that you don't remember, or so that you don't forget to plug your headphones back in when you walk into the other room or anything like that. Just leaving them on. You know, when we first started, I thought you had shaved your head for a second there, just because you have your hair pulled back, and you really freaked me out for a second there until you walked away to go turn the record off just a second ago. I was like, did he shave his head?
Why do I look like a
No, I just
like I have an alien head?
no. He just looks like you have a shaved head right now.
Like, oh
With
shit,
hair-
he's showing the big lump in the back of his head. Hey, bro, you need to grow your hair back out because we can see the weird spot on your skull.
No, I didn't mean it in any sort of disrespectful way like that.
Okay, no. Yeah, ponytail man. I'm getting a 1994 Indian Spirit. I'm gonna smoke cigarettes while I ride without a helmet through Denver with nice boots on and my jeans perfectly rolled up to the top of my boots like it's casual.
Is that the style out there?
Yeah, I see that. Like everything's cold, and then you see the cuffed up jeans to the top of the boots. Like, this isn't, just wake up like this guy that's trying to be authentically some rough motorcycle guy.
Right.
Millennials, they just piece the image together and then they're like, see, I did it. I'm
Fucking fantastic.
but
As
yeah,
long as you're smoking American spirits, it's okay.
yeah, only, for sure. Fuck Trump.
That you're in a sea of that there, right?
Yeah, man, it's
Fuck
really,
Trump.
dude, so I was making a delivery the other night. This was when Trump and Biden had the debates. It was the night of. And the guy came out to meet me. Handsome, 58 glasses, nice house, condo, just the guy that's got it going on,
Yeah.
Probably a doctor. And while I'm talking to you, I'm loading up a few images of records that I'm going to update in a second.
That's cool.
I got a cool new effect for the video viewers if you're subscribing on Patreon. But this guy, he fucking came out and he brought up the
debates.
Yeah, he brought up the debates. Thank you. And he literally said, I just think Trump's talking too much. He won't let him talk. And I had just seen all that coming from left media on Twitter, like Trump interrupting him. So I was like, oh shit, this guy is repeating these talking points. But then he said, I really just think Biden's a good guy. I really do. That's quote unquote what he said. And that's the cartoon. That's the joke. That's the can't believe. I know another guy. He literally said, I thought Bill Gates was a good guy. Quote unquote, man. That's two people in my immediate circle that have literally said the most insane, sarcastic trope that sums up not being awake.
Well, on the complete other side of
I thought he
that,
was a good guy.
to balance things out here, I had a call with a customer the other day, and at the end of the call, I helped him fix his problem and everything that he was having. At the end of the call, he's like, well, and just to let you know, I'm definitely switching. Oh, look at this shit. Switching phone companies at the as soon as I'm ready for an upgrade on my next phone because because you guys are a crazy Democrat company, and I'm not going to continue to support you by purchasing your product. And like, this had been a super cordial conversation. Like me and this guy have been getting along well the whole time until the very end of the call, where he just starts to light me up about how he's switching phone companies to like I think he was going to switch to a Samsung or something because he didn't believe in our values anymore. And I just wanted to ask, like, all right, well, who do you think this company that you're switching over to probably politically supports? Do you think that they're hardcore Trump supporter? It's just fucking stupid.
And what difference is he going to make if
right? Yeah,
if
you're
he
going to make
convinces you?
Yeah, I'm like, all right. And I just literally sat there. I was like, all right. Well, is there anything else I can help you with? Like, I'm not going to respond to that, but people just blindly following massive groups of other humans and not critically thinking for themselves is the point here.
I find myself guilty of that in some areas.
Sure.
Like a podcast I listen to. Morning Combat's Fight Podcast. Shout out to those guys. Fucking Luke Thomas. I probably give too much of a shit about someone I've never met because I listen to every episode. But fucking Luke, man. He shits all over Eminem.
Uh-oh. And you are a huge Eminem fan, so.
Yeah, but Luke's a really smart guy in his military background. So he's like really smart and cynical.
What's he shitting on Eminem about?
He's not wrong, is my whole thing. Right? I don't think people are wrong when they express the sentiment that
was this about the
political, he's corporate. He's washed up and he's corporate, and because his radio songs that he does with Rihanna and shit, they pointed out that like he's just trying to make pop while at the same time acting like some hard person. And fair. I get that. Yeah, fair super enough. Fair. Yeah. But at the same time, if you listen to that record,
the whole thing,
there's like 8 or 9 songs that are what they're saying he's not. He's just like doing everything.
Well, it's the whole thing of just reading the headline and not actually clicking on the article to go deeper into it, right?
Yeah, and if you hear one track from the record that is awesome, I don't know anybody could be like, this is so corporate and stupid. It's like, dude, this is fucking awesome. You're just hung up on the Rihanna hit and the weird stuff he does. Because he does do that weird shit. Like I
probably didn't even listen
songs.
to the record. He probably didn't listen to the record and only heard the songs that were on the radio and is basing his judgment for the entire record from that one corporatized hit that produced.
But that's just an example of me getting caught up too of mass thought, because maybe I am an Eminem fanboy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like a keeping check of, because he's still wrong, but he's also right. Because there's a lot of songs where like the verse is good, but the beat is just like, what is this? It's like
there is a lot of that like trash beats in some of his newer.
Yeah, like really weird beats. The verse is great. Like, speaking as somebody who has written and recorded rap songs, check out our record, Metamorphicon, Black Matter Lives. Like, you write a verse, you could just switch the beat out and keep the verse, and it changes everything. Right. So it's his same verses that have these weird beats and all this shit, even his radio hits that are, if you just put like a really fat, evil beat behind it, so it's like I put the shit on his beats.
Yeah, which you're basically, once again, you're listening to the whole record, and he's listening to a radio hit and making a judgment on the whole record from that.
But the broad stroke that he fucking sucks is so insane. It's like, I get it, there's some shit. But you listen to any rapper's record, dude. I listen to rappers, I try to discover new people. It's always the same shit, and more than half of the record is bullshit. There's only 2 or 3 of the ones that are good that make, it's like, this is all even Zero fucking love his shit, but most of the records are bullshit. Eminem doesn't get away with that. Like, people are like, oh, most of this record is bullshit, just like every record they like, but he doesn't get away. It's really weird. It's a really strange thing, the whole Eminem hate phenomena. It really is strange to me.
Well, he's definitely going to get hate in this day and age too, being that he's, white and straight.
He's super
Man,
political. Like he rages on
yeah,
behalf of the
I
machine.
know, I know he does.
Like in his new CD, he said, "Black people fighting for their rights while white people just want to get hair. Black people fighting for rights in America while white people just want to get their hair done." And I'm like, I get that, but very uninformed, inaccurate, super biased statement.
Yeah, yeah, it's pandering, right?
Pandering, that's the word I'm looking for. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And when
it's
you pander to like the mainstream establishment narrative that they're spinning up, it's easy because it's so hard to even like I don't even know. I don't even know. But he panders. That's a good word.
yeah, he panders.
Pander.
But he's still a phenomenal musician and lyricist, and
Yeah, like it's good shit. I don't
can't
know how
you can't dismiss all of that, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, today we're going to continue talking a little bit about the CIA and some of their involvement in um, efforts to control the minds of both the general public and individuals to do their bidding. And part of that, and I think you've read up on this a lot more than I have, so I know you have some notes and shit to go over, was the Manson murders and how they could have been potentially been involved with Charles Manson back in the 60s and the 69 murders.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a different narrative that potentially took place than the one that the Helter Skelter narrative. So, yeah, what do you have about that? Because I know you read Tom O'Neill's book Chaos, and probably
Yeah,
have a lot of notes from it.
that's basically where my notes are coming from. I just wanted to share from that book, and it's a portion of the book. His book is fucking awesome. I'm giving away very little, but when you brought up MK Ultra to do as a topic, I had started reading that book, and I couldn't stop reading the book.
You finished it?
Oh yeah, I read it. Yeah, basically read it twice, almost virtually.
Damn.
But he, what was I saying? Yeah, it wound up. His book on the Manson murders wound up evolving into a 20-year project that led into MK Ultra and having a deep dive into the JFK assassination.
Yeah,
And
20-year research project for this guy, basically.
yeah, you know how that started for him?
I know he got some deal back in '99 with this magazine company where he was supposed to do basically a story about this. And he ended up, that's it. So for the video viewers, Dylan has up this probably 20-year-old picture on the screen behind him as his background. That's not 20 years old, but it's probably like, 15 years old or so.
Yeah. No, 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 no. We need to
Uh,
resize it so they can see the top and bottom. It's the CD cover of the On Deaf Ears. Right above the screen is our logo, and right below is On Deaf Ears. So go listen to that record because that's up.
okay,
And
I thought this was just a photo because I couldn't see the actual.
no, it's not sizing it to the screen. So you can see the artwork on the jam tape, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to size it.
Anyway, sorry, I got distracted there by the background. I saw like a
Well, I
old
wanted to
picture of
plug this
myself.
stuff as announcements. Go check out these two records, Death of Skepsis and Alfred and the Detonators. Okay, yeah, back to
I
that.
forgot where I was at.
We were talking about
Oh,
MK Ultra.
yeah. So he started out with
Tom
this,
O'Neill.
yeah, with this bid from a magazine to do a story on this, and he ended up doing a super deep dive. He missed his deadlines. I think he ended up getting, basically fired or something like that from that magazine for, I guess, just taking too long to try and get any type of content over to him.
Well, his boss,
And
he was going to do an article on how it affected culture. And it turned into a 20-year project for this book that led into MK Ultra. So that's the whole twist, because it starts with Susan Atkins, the bitch that killed Sharon Tate. Dude, she stabbed her like 16 times. She was pregnant.
that's fucking really dark.
Like the account of it. So she was arrested with Manson. This is going to be about his parole officer. This is from a few chapters of O'Neill's book.
All right.
But
So this is pre-murders. What you're about to talk about when you're saying about with his parole officers?
yeah. So this is going to cover some pre-murder, but it's about the parole officer and a scientist, psychiatrist. I got the details later. And another guy, and how his parole officer and the MK Ultra studies at the Haight-Ashbury, that summer of love, was all reflective of these rat studies that came from one of the scientists, that exactly what he learned in the rats is what happened at Haight-Ashbury, and more specifically with Manson and the family and the murders.
Okay, so
at the time,
you said a lot there. Let's unpack.
Yeah. So we're going to unpack that. So, but at the time, Vincent Bugliosi was the prosecutor.
Right.
And his whole story is bullshit because he had to manufacture the jury to convict Manson on conspiracy charges. Basically, what happened was they all testified against Manson so hardcore that they were able to convict Manson on controlling other people's actions.
So
mind control that's how Manson got convicted, was Vincent Bugliosi's prosecution that got the jury to believe Manson was convicted on conspiracy.
Right. So he was basically convicted. So this is what Vincent's argument was, that Manson, he basically meant to incite a race war, and he singled out Sharon Tate's home, because she lived in the same home that Terry Melcher lived in, who he accused of reneging on a record deal, basically.
Record producer.
Right, a record producer. And that's how he was, according to Vincent, that's how Manson was going to get his message out to accumulate his followers, right? Was by getting this huge record deal. And so he was pissed that he reneged on that record deal. And so Manson and his family, basically, he put forward the helter-skelter theory, is what they call it. The conspiracy, that conspiracy, basically. So
because it was like Manson wanted to get revenge, because Terry Melcher was the previous resident of the Cielo house where the Tates were and that crew was living when they were murdered. Melcher was the previous resident. Melcher moved out after he denied Manson a record deal. So the whole Vincent Bugliosi theory was that Manson ordered these girls to do a heinous murder at the house to scare Terry Melcher, who had already moved, into giving him a record deal. That was the theory, and he was actually convicted on that. So what Tom O'Neill uncovered was all the other stuff going on. And you know how like at 9/11 they had all these warnings about these terrorists living down there in Florida? They never acted on it.
Yes.
They were on no-fly list, but they were there getting money from the CIA and stuff, living in that same thing where they ignore the warnings and then shit happens was basically what happened with the Manson murders. They so let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Vincent Bugliosi and the Helter Skelter thing is all bullshit.
Yep. It was basically him stating that they were trying to incite that race war
between the Black Panthers and
it was by staging the murders to be the work of the Black Panthers, and that Manson hoped to incite the backlash against blacks and an all-out war between white liberals and conservatives. After which the black Muslims would vanquish everyone except Manson, who, at the head of his followers, would basically emerge as the rightful post-apocalyptic plantation boss, more or less. That was the theory of this crazy motherfucker. And there was a lot of history that happened before the murders that I heard about this in a podcast, so I know you'll be able to talk a little bit more in detail, having read Tom O'Neill's book. But there was a lot of shit that happened before that really points to Manson being a CIA asset.
Mm-hmm.
and why they came up with these crazy stories to try and cover up these dirty footprints of the CIA.
Yeah, it's really wild that they were trying to start a race war, and they were like, because a couple nights before the Sharon Tate murders was the LaBianca murders at a separate place, and it was a similar murder where pig was written, there was blood sprawled, they were stabbed a bunch, and that murder was in a different county, and that murder was never accounted in the whole testimony trial of the Tate murders, even though they were identical murders. And it was like none of that was taken into account. Those cops were like cut out from the whole LAPD or something. But there was an identical murder nights before that was, and one of the, I forget the details about, but one of the murderers in that, I think, the girl that was there that helped murder Sharon Tate, because it was Susan Atkins that murdered Sharon Tate, and there was two other girls, and then Tex Watson who drove the car.
So basically, what you're saying is the murder that happened a couple days, the day before.
One of the girls that was one of the four at the main Manson murders, she was there a couple nights before with her boyfriend. And they did the murder at the LaBianca household in a different county, and it was identical, and it was like all the same shit.
And Vincent Bugliosi didn't tie those two together.
It was never in the trial.
Prosecution against Manson.
It was never in the trial. And then the cops who did that investigation, Tom O'Neill interviewed him all these years later in this book research. It's like, what was your thing? It's like they didn't. It's a super detailed book, but I'm paraphrasing. But it's like
right.
Those cops didn't get their voice heard, and they were cast out, and one of them retired or something like. It was like that, and they were shocked that it was never brought up in the trial.
Holy shit!
There was a lot of shit not brought up in the trial, which we'll get to later when it gets to that. But that parole officer in charge of Manson and Susan Atkins for that whole trial was one of the guys that. We'll get into it, man. It's fucking crazy.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, like everything we're talking about is like we'll get into it, but
just get into it.
Vincent Bugliosi, that whole thing was like bullshit. And then there was two murders a couple nights before because they were trying to start a race war, blame it on the Black Panthers, and like Manson wanted to start it. So Susan Atkins, the bitch that killed her, was arrested with Manson. He got a DUI. This was before the murders. He got a DUI. He violated parole, and he was released. Susan was not released for 2 weeks. That was in LA. She had like a probation in Mendocino County, which was 1,100 miles away. So those cops drove that far to get her because she violated. That's how important she was. Okay, so her POs in those counties weren't happy. She didn't want to like sign for unemployment. She was openly refusing to just comply. And the PO recommended that her probation be revoked. And most of those recommendations are listened to. Like if the PO recommends something, the judge will do it. But the judge didn't violate, and instead he completed her probation. Two different results on the record. Violating. Yeah, complete. None of that was reported during the trial. Like this girl had already been released and stuff.
So she's violating her probation, and her parole officers like drag her ass back, and they make a recommendation like send her ass back to jail basically. And the judge is like, nope, you know what? I'm gonna just let her go.
Yeah. Even after the guy is like, hey, she's really bad, and just saying she's not gonna listen. So the head of probation office in LA, Thomas Martin. When Tom O'Neill said he never saw that happen in his 32 years of experience. So he knew the judge well. He was sure he had an ulterior motive, that he knew something they didn't. That was his read on the judge at the time when he was like, what the fuck is this?
And all of this is alluding to there's pressure coming from above, probably from our intelligence agencies
super above.
that are not allowing him to actually follow the law in this particular situation.
Mm-hmm. And a year and a half earlier, she was arrested in Oregon after stealing a car in California. Threatened she would have killed the cops if they didn't catch her by surprise. That's what she said to them. Her probation was transferred to San Francisco, where she met Charlie and started backsliding. So her parole officer was like, hey, she's not doing well since she transferred. So in November, she told her PO she was going to have a community marriage, basically joining the family, going to Florida and Mexico. And she didn't care that she couldn't. So the PO noticed her behavior changed after Manson. After she met Manson, she went like total rogue. Her first probation officer agreed. Her speech was disorganized. She kept saying, love is everything, everything is nothing. Like repeating these weird things. They tried to track her down to the original sentencing judge, George Jones of Oregon. Afterward, the paper trail stopped. No court filing documents or memos for her. Then the judge signed an order terminating her probation. All the while, her POs are warning her they're warning, Susan, you're going to go to jail if you don't straighten out. And then she's like, whatever. The judges go poof. And the POs are like, what? Yeah. So in 1968, in Ukiah, which is northwest of San Francisco, after like San Fran got like overloaded, go to this place, her and 5 girls were recruiting boys, luring them into an all-girl orgy. They gave one. It's kind of a popular story. They gave him LSD. Underage boys. He hallucinated his legs were snakes, and he ran home and told his parents. And his dad was like head sheriff. So head sheriff's son, he arrested these girls. Okay.
For giving his son acid, and wanted saying, hey,
so
we're gonna have an orgy
fucked.
with you. Yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah, so
he's underage. They're adults.
Yeah, so they called Manson's parole officer in San Francisco, Roger Smith, and they were released with no charge.
What the fuck?
So Roger Smith turns out to be the guy that's pulling strings as long as these crimes are associated with Manson. And Roger Smith and his wife basically took, they became foster parents of Manson's first kid with one of the girls in the family. They fostered his kid while he was...
That's wild.
Yeah, his parole officer fostered his kid and never reported nothing.
So he's probably tied to the CIA.
None of this ever reported in the trial.
Right.
Yeah.
How long was he his parole officer for? Because I remember hearing, at least on the podcast, that Manson was getting in trouble long before his start with the family. Like he was in and out of jail all before that.
Yeah, he got out in 56, or he was in there in 56 for Grand Theft Auto or something. Like
repeated offender over and over. That's why I'm asking, like, how long was he his parole officer for?
Like 2 years in the ballpark. Because eventually this bullshit gets to the top after some news breaks. And then the guy's like, whoa, like the head of parole officers or whatever, he was like, whoa, I got to fire this guy. And then the new PO came in during the trial, and the new PO took all the blame. And Roger Smith was never questioned during the trial.
What?
Yeah. And just to show how...
Did the new guy let him off as much as Roger Smith let him off?
No, that's the thing. The game was up. This whole thing that was happening was up.
So the CIA basically at that point said, fuck this. We're done with him. Let's just throw him under the bus, bury him, paint him out to be this crazy bastard who was trying inside this war.
It was more... we'll get to that, too. It was a media outrage that caused the head of some department to finally notice.
All right.
It was like that.
Okay. Like I said, I don't know the story as well, so you have to catch me up here.
So in spring 67 to June 68, that was the summer of love, haight-ashbury. I bet that was a crazy time.
Probably.
He used LSD, Manson did. He created his following. Manson was released from Terminal Island Prison in March 21st, 67 for forging a government check. Regardless of Manson's known history of homosexual rape, beating his wife, and armed robbery. Prison supervisors and records alike considered him non-violent. So he like homosexually raped guys in prison and things like that. He violated parole right after release by going to Berkeley from LA. Years earlier, his parole was revoked for not reporting to his supervisor. This time, he violated parole. He just called San Francisco Federal Parole Office. They filed routine paperwork and transferred him over to Roger Smith. That's how he got to Roger Smith. Was getting out of prison, saying, fuck you, I'm going to Berkeley. And Manson called up and said, hey, I'm here now. And they just like transferred him right there. And then in the Helter Skelter thing, it was recorded different. So an officer and student at UC Berkeley School of Criminology. That's who Roger Smith was. Bugliosi in Helter Skelter says Manson requested transfer to San Francisco. The prosecutor of the Tate LaBianca had Manson's parole file, so he knew he was lying, because the parole file doesn't reflect him requesting anything. It just requests a voluntary transfer or whatever.
So you think at that point when he was released, initially released from prison in 1967, that's whenever he became involved with the CIA? Am I following that correctly?
The CIA is not yet, but yeah, when he was released from prison, he said,
that's when Roger Smith took over his case. That's what I'm saying. But like that, none of that was recorded in the court case, which I get.
Yeah,
how it was outlined that he requested a transfer, but that never happened. It just happened actually on the back end, on the government side.
Back end, yeah,
right.
Back end.
And that's why I was asking, like, if he was already, a CIA asset at that point, which is why they transferred him to Roger Smith, or were they planning on utilizing him after he was transferred to under Roger Smith's supervision?
It goes back to the MK Ultra in that last episode when you brought up that they monitor them in prison, like the prison studies.
Yeah, they did experiments on prisoners. Yes.
Yeah, so they would isolate them in prison. So the whole thing is Manson was a guy that they scouted and recruited through the felony prison system.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So he was the experiment.
So he was probably experimented on while he was in prison.
Yeah.
At that time, which is why they said, "Oh no, this guy's harmless. There's nothing wrong with him, even though he's raping prisoners and he was beating his wife and shit."
Yeah, he was given a pass because this guy fit he checked all the boxes for somebody that's going to act like these rats when we conduct our
easily programmable.
Yeah, schizophrenic, yada yada. Again, we'll get to all of that. Manson's prison time at the federal level. Bugliosi, this is one thing I can't, maybe you'll get this. Bugliosi noted that 99 out of 100 criminals never see the inside of a federal court, meaning that Manson was the 1 out of 100 that got to the federal level, right? But he was lauded as a sophisticated criminal. If he was sentenced at a state level, he would have seen only a fraction of the prison time. I don't know why that was, like, is it Manson's fault that he wasn't? If he was a sophisticated criminal, he would have milked the system to get prosecuted at a state level, so he would have a fraction of the time. Is that what this is trying to point out?
I guess so, because if Bugliosi was trying to say that, I don't know what he was trying to say right there. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me that it made it up to the federal court, because if the CIA is trying to bury this guy, and you'd want him to do the most amount of time possible, which is why they would want to escalate it all the way up to the federal court. maybe he was just stating that he was such an advanced criminal, that's why it had to go to that level, to try and reinforce his conspiracy case. Is that maybe what? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm stupid. So let's just.
Those sounded like better ideas than what I had. But apparently he was a little diamond in the rough in the federal system, serving more time than he would have if he would have gotten prosecuted at the state for, I don't know.
I don't know well enough to understand the significance of that one way.
But there's a weird thing that he was into this book, Stranger in a Strange Land. while in the Haight during 1967. The main character was Valentine Michael, who he named his son after. That Roger Smith.
Adopted. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
fostered. Yeah.
Roger Smith was nicknamed Jubal Harshaw from the book. Jubal Harshaw was the main character's lawyer, teacher, protector, and spiritual guide on Earth. Valentine Michael comes to Earth to start a new race. Guarded by Jubal, he makes a nest of women who he initiates through sex. He demanded his followers surrender their egos to them through total submission. One of the most sacred practices was sharing water, which took on a, quote, druggy undertone. Killing people saved their souls. It was called discorporating, of which they began to do with impunity until eventually Valentine becomes the world's savior. So Roger Smith knew he was nicknamed this guy.
That story lines up kind of well with the Helter Skelter theory, if I'm being honest, too, though. Like his vision, you know, that Vincent Bugliosi kind of painted, that kind of lines up pretty well with that. That could be the chicken before the egg theory there, that maybe he knew that Manson was into that book and painted that theory around,
or maybe he was
narrative in that book.
He was intentionally given that book in prison while dosing him up on LSD, while they like deconstructed his ego and rebuilt it through this story.
That's true. Maybe that was the whole experiment in the first place, is can we actually pull this off?
And Roger Smith knew all this, and he actually was questioned about it and said it was like a good thing for him to associate with these whatever.
I mean, I think that the strongest evidence of his government involvement in this whole murder plot is the fact that he kept getting released. Not that he kept getting released from prison, even though I think I remember hearing that at one point in time he was released from prison after getting arrested for a couple things, but that he kept violating parole with no punishments or repercussions.
Well, you want to hear some harder evidence?
Let's hear some harder evidence. So let's hear it.
Manson was assigned to Roger Smith, this answers your question, through the experimental parole program called the San Francisco Project, which was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, which later he uncovers was funded by the CIA. It was a seed of the CIA. So the project studied the relationship between parolees and supervision officers. The level of supervision had an effect on recidivism or not, like if they recede back to their old ways. So we have like 3 tiers. You know, they studied normal, which was 100 clients, ideal for 40 clients, and intensive with 20 clients. Roger Smith was ideal, but towards the end, he was only with Manson. He whittled his whole thing down to just one guy. Roger Smith was very special because he only had one guy, and it was Manson. And Smith claimed to never have met Manson before becoming his officer, but Smith's research assistant, Gail Sedala, remembered it different. Smith told her in '68 he was assigned to Manson because he was his parole officer years earlier at Illinois Joliet Federal Prison. That Manson was never in the federal parole system, only incarcerated for a few days in '56. Gail Sedala was shocked to find out Smith had no memory of meeting Manson before '67. She was certain that was the reason for their connection.
It's a cover-up.
Yes, there's a lot of that, like, ooh, I don't know. I have no recollection of this. Smith studied the use of drug use and gang members in Oakland. The study was successful enough to warrant a press conference, and the New York Times reported violent behavior increased relative to drug use rather than mellowing them out. They wanted to distinguish between becoming sociopathic due to drug use, or if it was the other way around, drug use brought out what was already there. Smith conducted his research by befriending gangs and immersing himself in their groups. He became an expert on gang behavior, violence, and drug use, of which Manson influenced violent behavior on his gang through drug use, while he was Smith's one and only parolee. They would set up outposts in the slums and befriend gangs outside of churches and community centers. Smith was also like a hardcore Republican, so it was weird that he encouraged him to go to the Haight to soak up the good vibes.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, a hardcore Republican Christian would want him to go to church and stay away from all that craziness, tighten your life up, you know. No, not like, hey, you know what, go experience some free love. Yeah, doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, he had a lot of praise for his client Manson, um, who of all people Smith was the closest. So he would know he was breaking the law all this time, doing drugs and
Yeah.
things like that. One
So,
report said Manson is showing excellent progress and is in better shape personally than he has been in a long, long time. And then, like after the murders, him and this other scientist would write a book, like distancing themselves from Manson, where he would say, "I knew he was crazy." But all leading up to the murders, he's praising him and totally just like, he's good, he's good, he's good, he's good. After the fact, things change.
so you think in his meetings with Smith that Smith was just maybe dosing Manson with LSD and breaking his ego down, and then training him how to do that to his followers, his family
Yeah.
followers?
Yeah,
Is
that's what
that
it
what you
seems
think
like.
the ultimate uh,
That's what it seems
goal
like.
was?
That's what it seems like. And my next thought is people like the Stephen Paddocks of the world who just come out of nowhere with all this clearance and supplies. Just boom, 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 boom.
So who are you talking about there?
More MK Ultra mind control Manson style murders, but in the 20th century.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, no. I got you. Yeah, they got the Vegas shooter.
Yeah.
It took a second to register for me.
Yeah. The Vegas shootings is a weird one. We should do an episode on that. I keep bringing it up.
Yeah, you do, and like you know what, I don't want to. A lot of people die, and I don't want to like talk about shit that I don't know all the details on that well. So yeah,
Yeah.
let me before we start talking about it on the podcast,
Yeah.
let me look into it and get my facts straight on that to see if I can highlight any of the shadiness if there is any that took place in that.
I do subscribe to the multiple shooter theory because it's pretty, ballistics experts broke down the audio clips from the event, which you can listen to, and it's clearly multiple shots from different angles and stuff.
So I'll check that out. Yeah, I mean I'll check out the ballistics experts and see what they think of the whole situation and people that have a lot more knowledge on the subject than I do, and if it's plausible that there were more than one shooter, and yeah, we'll do an episode on that. We'll look
Yeah.
into it if there's enough meat on the bone for us to do an episode on.
So Manson was in jail for interfering with the police officer in the line of duty, which is a felony. He was trying to prevent the arrest of one of his underage female recruits, Ruth Ann Morehouse, whose dad is some player later. He was given a 30-day suspended sentence, 3 years probation. In Helter Skelter, this was basically a footnote and didn't mention he was convicted. Being out of prison for 4 months, Manson was released to the street after a few days. His parole file was never released.
So he was supposed to go to prison for 4 months and was released after a few days.
Yeah, his parole file was never released or permitted as evidence in the courtroom.
And
during the
this is after, so this is in the time period after being assigned to Smith and then going to jail. Sorry
yeah.
if you said the time on there and I missed it.
It's in chronological order. I'm not skipping around. So
all right.
So
So gets in trouble, goes to jail, supposed to stay there 4 months, gets out
Smith
quick.
now. He's under Smith now.
All right.
I'll edit this gap out.
Okay. You doing some reading?
Yeah, I just have a big paragraph here. It's not organized. But in the death penalty phase, it's really important to let in any evidence. And it was requested that this be let in as evidence. And they objected. It was shut down. And the judge didn't let in the evidence that could have kept the guy from getting the death penalty because his parole file reflected like some bullshit. Is this making any sense? Because it's a lot of
kind of. So he got, what did he get in trouble for again? Can you repeat that for me one more time? So he got in trouble for what?
Interfering with a cop on his line of duty.
Okay.
which is
And
a
so
felony.
it was a felony. So he definitely violated his parole with that. Was supposed to go to jail for a couple months. Got out within a few days. And in his helter skelter conviction, they did not bring this piece of evidence up against him, which to me would seem like it would push him more towards the death penalty than anything. It's just additional charges and additional evidence against him. But I guess what you're positioning is that this, if this had been brought up in the main and not thrown out as evidence, it could have kept him from seeing the death penalty. Is that what you're saying?
Irving Canarak, what I'm saying is, so this is evidence that supported Manson, and Canarak wanted to bring it in, but how does it support it? Because that's a good question.
I don't think it supports it. It supports him. I mean,
Smith reported that Manson changed overnight after his first trip of LSD. He said he's doing really good. Felony. At the time he wrote this on July 31st, 1967, Manson was in a jail cell at the time he wrote that.
so I think maybe what we're talking about and what you're saying there is that this could be used as evidence for Manson in the fact that he was set up, right? That he was drugged, he committed these crimes from being drugged, kind of supporting Tom O'Neill's position on the whole thing, that he was used by the CIA as an asset, and he was almost kind of a victim in this whole thing.
That sounds like it makes sense.
That's the only way I could see it making sense, considering that they're stating that, oh, hey, this additional crime that he committed, that he was supposed to go to prison for months and only serve days for, could be evidence to help him get out of the death penalty. You know what I mean? Like, unless it was positioned as, hey, he committed these crimes because he was drugged and he was under the influence from people like Roger Smith, who are using him as a human experiment to do their bidding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me read this again because there's something in there. Interfering with the police officer in the line of duty, which is a felony, trying to prevent the arrest of an underage female recruit. He was convicted and given a 30-day suspended sentence with 3 years probation. So he was convicted. So in Helter Skelter, this was a footnote, and they didn't mention he was convicted. Being out of prison for 4 months at this time, Manson was released to the streets after only a few days. Manson's parole file was never released nor permitted as evidence in the courtroom for the Tate LaBianca murders. During the death penalty phase, Irving Canarak of the defense had subpoenaed the file, hoping to use it as evidence in the case to save his client's life. Yeah, how would that work? What would he say? He would get the parole files where Roger Smith is saying he's doing amazing, but they're not letting those parole files in.
Okay.
Yeah,
that would make sense. That makes sense. Like Roger's assessment of how he's doing so much better, but they wouldn't have let them gather that as evidence for Manson.
Yeah, the U.S. Attorney General John Mitchell refused to release it, and furthermore sent a Justice Department official, David Anderson, to help Bugliosi squash it in the trial. Like, the judge worked with people to squash this. During the death penalty trial, when a defendant's life is at stake, any evidence that can support the defendant is allowed. This was a near unprecedented action taken in this case to squash the subpoena. Canarak asked Anderson if the file contained information that would incriminate the Attorney General. Bugliosi objected, and the judge sustained. Anderson never had to answer, and the file was never allowed in the evidence. The whole episode of the trial was excluded from Helter Skelter. And the whole file in the trial was described as 4 inches thick, but after a shit ton of trying, Tom O'Neill got 50 pages which was still enough to show that Manson was given immunity. I think that's what was in there. It's just, hey, y'all were giving him immunity this whole time. Now you want to act like he's this bad guy. It would just fuck up their play him.
Which is crazy. He was being given immunity this whole time.
Yeah. Roger Smith.
Like to me that's like evidence enough that like there's some government involvement.
Yeah, and this answers the question, because when you talk about like big cabal and the power elites, and people are like, how would they even organize that? This explains how that would happen.
Yeah.
This is how it happens.
And this is what fucking people do, right? They're doing shady shit at the CIA that they're getting funding for, like projects like MK Ultra, and they don't have very much oversight, and they're doing things they shouldn't do and pulling strings they shouldn't be pulling on with people, and they're just very good at covering it up. And it's not even like, even if you didn't subscribe to the whole Illuminati conspiracy and the elite, like that's just what human beings do, right? And they're getting funding for these projects. They don't want that funding to get pulled, right? Because they're getting money for it, and so they're gonna make it seem squeaky clean, but they're doing shady shit in the background. So
yeah, just like you said, the funding, because Roger Smith, one of these guys, they liked having him around because it meant they would easily get more funding from his faction.
Right.
And stuff. And Roger Smith, I forgot what I was going to say, but he tried sending Manson to Mexico, dude. In the same letter that praised Manson, Smith requested to send him to Mexico to be in a house band for a hotel, totally unsupervised. Not even mentioning Manson was previously arrested in Mexico years before and deported to the U.S. Roger Smith was trying to send him back, like he's going to be a house band. That didn't work out. He immediately requests to send him again, like puts in another request. He got offered, this is what he said, he got offered a second job by a general distributor of the Permagard Corporation of Phoenix, Arizona, named Mr. Dean Morehouse. Ruth Ann Morehouse's dad, the underage recruit. He was arrested for
Jesus.
Yeah, like I don't even know what to make of that connection. So he wanted to send him there to survey the market for insecticides, soil additives, and mineral food supplements. Like from a house band to just some guy with gear measuring shit. Like not only that, but it was to Mazatlan, South America, the capital of drug trafficking in the world at the time.
So he was supposed to go and work over there?
He was trying to send Manson there under these
different... That's crazy.
Yeah.
How are you going to monitor him as a parole officer when he's a continent away?
That's why he didn't get the request. But like, there are people along the way that are like, no, can't do that. So it's like good and bad is going back and forth.
Yeah. You can't just go completely rogue.
Yeah. Smith requested Manson to go to Florida to meet with recording agents.
He's trying to help his music career?
Yeah, this is where like he requested they go to Florida, and then he gets a yellow bus with all the family, and they go to Mexico, and where else was it? They go 2 other places because there's no records of this whole time whenever he does it. Smith post dates, so don't let me skip that sentence. So he wants to send him to Florida to meet with recording agents, of which again go against strict orders. Smith post-dated the letters suggesting he wrote them after Manson had already left, which would protect him from another violation. So it's like he wrote the letters and they planned it. And there's no sign that they went to Florida. The only evidence suggests they went to Mexico, if anywhere. The letter was from November 1967, on the same day Susan Atkins's parole officers were trying to prevent her from traveling. Susan and the family left town in a big yellow bus with permission from Smith. So Susan Atkins was busted somewhere else, and those POs were like, no. And then the guy, Roger Smith, is requesting permission and is like, no, but Roger's like, whatever. But Roger has the real strings, because in the end, the judge drops it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, the judge was going to drop her parole violations.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no records from that whole town, from that whole time. Manson was supposed to send postcards to Smith. No evidence that he did. Susan Atkins's has account. Man, that's hard to say. Susan Atkins's account, possessive Atkins. Her account of spending the winter in Mexico was one of the pieces of evidence that they never even went to Florida, because there was no formal records from the parole officer that should have been filing records daily.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal. I'm just trying to send my client to Mexico and South America and Florida to meet recording
Yeah.
A&R guys.
Yeah. The supervision stopped for 5 months after those letters, and Manson, that would be like January to June, Manson reported to Smith daily or weekly, but there was no paperwork. There should be a lot. The commission only released 12 documents from the 14 months. The LA portion was from May 68 to 69. It's incomplete, with only 16 letters from officials, including Samuel Barrett. That's the guy who came after Smith once Smith's whole thing blew up. Barrett was critical of Manson, seeing that his parole was at odds with the praise he had been receiving from Smith beforehand. Despite the criticism, Barrett, who Bugliosi singled out at trial and in Helter Skelter. I read that wrong. Despite the criticism, Barrett was who Bugliosi singled out in the trial. He never called Smith to testify, who had been watching Manson the majority of the time. It's like the murders happened, trial started, they replaced them with the guy, and they were like, Barrett, you fucked up.
It's like, no, actually, it had been the guy who'd been watching over him for 2 fucking years.
Yeah, the guy with the studying criminology, specifically drug use and gang behavior, that wanted to send Manson
to Mexico and South America. Yeah. Yeah, that seems like you'd want to talk to that guy.
And all these files were missing. There should be
what ended up happening to I know he fostered one of Manson's kids, but what ended up happening to him in the long run? Did he get in any kind of trouble for all of this?
That kid is actually the original founder of IBM.
What?
Yeah, IBM, and actually owns like the patent that eventually became the Duramax transition on the Chevys. Fun fact.
Holy shit, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, no, I'm fucking with you. That's not true. I don't know what happened to the kid.
I'm not talking about the kid. I'm talking about Smith.
Oh, Smith.
Yeah, what happened to Smith?
Did
he get in trouble for this? Did he go to jail? Or did he just ride off into the sunset, forgotten about, since the other guy took the heat for all of this?
Basically that.
Fuck.
I think he picked up a job like
and Tom O'Neill's just the guy who uncovered all this and was like...
Yeah, and everybody died.
So is Smith already dead?
I forgot. I think it's in here somewhere.
Well, if Smith's dead, man, that kind of sucks that Tom O'Neill uncovered all this shit afterwards. And
yeah, that's what's fucked up, is it takes like all these years to uncover this shit. By that time, it's too late. Like by the time 9/11 becomes a hard case, they're all going to be dead.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a bunch of Gen Z people running the economy that are like, oh, 9/11, huh?
Yeah, who cares, right? Yeah, that's what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
Oh, you look what they're doing in Germany right now. They're prosecuting these old like a secretary that was for one of the SS officers, I believe. She's like 100 years old, and they're prosecuting her. And then a guard at one of the
she's still alive?
Concentration camps. Yeah, they're both still alive. Look it up. They're prosecuting him now. Which is a little late in the game, but hey, they're getting it done. But we're not even. Are these people? But none of these people can even pay for their sins. They already got away scot-free.
Yeah.
From the little bit I read online about this whole deal, That's why I was asking what happened with Smith. If he's actually dead, or if he is contesting some of this evidence that Tom O'Neill has uncovered.
I don't know. I think it's mentioned in the book. I probably didn't put it in what I have here about the stuff, but.
All right, my bad. Didn't mean to derail you with those questions.
Oh, it's
all right.
Derail me because I'm basically just reading paraphrased paragraphs, and I feel like I'm like a robot.
Well, no, I mean, I'm learning. I'm learning a lot about it, and we're pausing after every paragraph so we can discuss a little bit about it and make sure I can clarify that I understood the paragraph you just read.
Yeah, because I
But
don't even understand the paragraph. You know what I mean? I have it in there, and I'm like, I know this makes sense, but
so yeah, so Manson, they go through this whole helter skelter trial. They never uncover all of this salacious evidence against, well, not against Manson, but probably for Manson, that actually point to the fact that the parole officers were really not following up and doing their jobs, which you would think would be something you'd want to address in the trial
yeah,
related to all these murders.
like none of the real people were questioned. A bunch of stuff was left out. Another weird one is when they were found sleeping in the ditch, when they all passed out in the ditch.
What's that? Tell me about that.
8 other people sleeping in a ditch with a baby on board the bus, full of sores and grime.
Ugh.
Manson was charged with Grand Theft Auto. Mary Brunner charged with endangering the life of an infant. I think that was their baby, maybe not. That's what blew up and got Smith fired. This blew up, and all of Smith's colleagues knew he was messing up. That's when he was taken off Manson's case, but still remained in contact with courts and Manson the whole time after not being his formal PO. Albert Wall, chief of the San Francisco Probation Office, wrote to the chief of probation office, Angus McEachin, in LA for help rounding up Manson. So the two top dogs are like, we got to get this motherfucker. Wall had to admit that his office's files on Manson were incomplete and he had been traveling freely between LA and San Francisco. Having been found the legal owner of the bus, Manson and the whole group were released one day later. McEachin wanted to get Manson because he had a pass with him in 1960, but things were different now, like with all this stuff. He couldn't just get him like like back then. I guess some stuff changed. He learned from Wall in a letter that Manson called up Wall's office to announce himself and tell about his travels and his plans. He said he would be at the Spahn Ranch and could be reached through Gary Hinman, who would be murdered later in the famous murders. When they jumped the fence at the Cielo house, Gary Hinman's like an 18-year-old in a truck in the driveway, and he's like, and they just boom, 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 shoot him. And then the guest house guy that cleans never heard anything.
What the fuck?
Shot him with a 22. Never heard anything. Then they went in the house and did the murders. So he basically called Wall and was like, hey, I'm just going to be over here. He said he would be at the Spahn Ranch through Gary Hinman. He could be reached through Gary Hinman, who would be murdered. Manson was arrested again on drug charges in LA. Manson was released again. Wall and McEachin continued trying to round him up. And they were the heads of their department, which is pretty fucking crazy. Wall finally sent a super stern letter saying, like, you need to get over here by June 12th. And he never did. He was staying with the Beach Boys as Dennis Wilson.
Which is wild.
Yeah, like, how do you just meet these guys? Like, they had, I think Dennis Wilson or one of those Terry Melcher had, like, a portable studio in a van. He would drive out and do field recordings. And he recorded, like, Manson's demo at one point. Like, they kind of let him on. Like, okay, we'll record you. And
they realize he's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. So Manson defied those orders. They knew where he was now, so they sent the new parole officer, Samuel Barrett, to show up. On June 12th, Barrett sent a letter to Manson saying he had to return. There's no records of what happened after that. The deadline evaporated, and there were no more letters until July. Manson said he was living there for free. He was never arrested, basically. They just let him stay there, and he built the family. That's whenever.
So why are the heads of the departments not just putting their foot, like sending a marshal or someone to go pick this guy up? They know where he's at. They just keep sending them fucking letters. Why?
I don't know.
But I thought they really wanted to pick him up.
I think that's formal protocol.
Like, is it something they just couldn't? Even though he is
It's not their
violating.
jurisdiction. He's like, I don't think they can operate in the other county without getting that county's consent, because there's some cross-county communication barriers, and that's why the previous murders were left out, because they were in a different county, and the LAPD was under the thumb, and they were like, "Fuck you," and you're so that.
All right, I guess this is the '60s. Shit's a little different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of it for Roger Smith. The other Smith is Dave Smith. He ran the clinic. He was a scientist, like a kind of a quiet kid, but he would inject rats with LSD and study them, and then he would walk home past the haight and see people doing the same things with LSD.
And so
that was kind of his start, was like, whoa. So Roger Smith was the guy that kept him free. And then Dave Smith is the guy that had the LSD studies that came in and started the clinic, where Roger Smith would be hanging out, having informal PO meetings with Manson. Because Roger Smith would say, no, he came by to hang out. And Manson was under the impression these were my meetings with my PO. At the clinic, where they're giving out free LSD and medicine, but it's really a study, because this guy had been studying it on rats. And this is where you get into the rat studies that predate him, that were funded by the government.
Now, wasn't this clinic that this guy ran still running almost some 20 years later and got closed like months after the book came out?
This one? Maybe. I haven't heard.
I remember hearing that. Anyway.
The HAFMC, the haight-ashbury Free Medical Clinic.
Yep.
But he had like a goal of making a free Medicare for all, like medication for all. So this was like his little project, but the government fund, like, it's kind of like this. It's very nuanced, but he seems to have some individual identity as far as his own dreams, mixed in with doing the government's bidding. Like, you're on our money, so study these rats and start this clinic, and we won't say nothing. Because they were just watching them across.
So Manson was going to this free clinic that this doctor,
getting dosed
up with LSD. Smith is meeting him there, and Manson's thinking that, hey, you know what, this counts as my PO meetings. And the whole time he's getting dosed up by LSD, probably getting programmed with whichever way that
they promoted the
CIA
psychedelic. They like painted the walls and did decorations.
This is before the MK Ultra program got exposed to the world by Seymour Hersh in '74.
Yeah.
So the public is unaware of the experiments that have been taking place within the MK Ultra program this whole time, where they're just actually going around at one point in time just dosing random people in bars and stuff like that, dosing Johns in Operation Midnight Climax. And this was probably, from what it sounds like, and especially considering the involvement of LSD in it, an offshoot of the MK Ultra program, or probably a sub-project, if I had to guess, of the MK Ultra program back then. And Manson was just one of the experiments, one of the participants in that, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But it's pretty. The evidence is pretty damning, considering how many times he kept getting let off for parole violations, and then the fact that he's going to this free clinic where he's meeting his parole officer, getting dosed up on LSD, having these conversations, meetings at the time. So pretty wild shit, man.
Yeah, and they were super repeat visitors. Repeat visitors, so they remembered them well, but years later when interviewed, the important players claimed they didn't remember them, but they were there all the time.
Now, was this Dave Smith ever brought into the trial or questioned or anything, considering that he saw Manson once a week at this free clinic where he's being given LSD?
No, this was what Dave Smith wrote in that book, Love Needs Care, about Manson. He wrote specifically about Manson during his studies. He wrote, like, this was after the murders when they wrote this book. It was like a memoir of when Manson was at my clinic. And Roger Smith had contributions in the book as well. And all of that episode of him at the clinic from these two guys was left out of Helter Skelter and the prosecution. It's a whole chapter that would totally have changed the story, and the jury, it would have affected how they can convict Manson. And that's kind of one of the twists, is if you uproot this whole thing, what does that do? Exonerate Manson?
Yeah, it kind of does.
So it's not even the point to exonerate him. It's almost like the point of...
I mean, they did some horrific shit, like the
really
killing the killing of Sharon Tate, who was pregnant at the time, is disgusting.
Yeah, because Susan Atkins, and then they got like reduced sentences for actually being the murderers. And
so you think Susan Atkins was just so as far as the family goes, you think that Manson was just using the techniques the CIA taught him to gain his followers? And
yeah, but only because that's what this evidence suggests.
Right.
Getting more into David Smith. Manson used the combo of LSD and mind games, invoking mysticism and pop psychology as the acid took hold. They started using speed when they moved to South LA and got it from the Hells Angels, trading sex for speed. Susan Atkins told David Smith in a mental assessment meeting for her trial coming up that she thinks Helter Skelter and the murders were a paranoid speed delusion. Bugliosi never mentioned the speed in the trial. Only LSD, which is how they totally shamed against the hippie movement in LSD.
Right.
Right.
Probably after the CIA realized, like, you know what, we can't really control people that well in this shit, so let's just shut it all down.
Yeah, they made it, like David Smith, they made it clear that they were sympathizing with him and they never had any idea about his psychotic side. David Smith was super in tune with the tactics Manson used on his followers, but never detailed where or how he became so familiar. Like, he was able to break down how Manson mind gamed his followers, but like how do you know? He would basically be explaining like the high science of it. Because LSD is super crucial to the process of indoctrination, and Manson urged his followers to stay away from speed, to only use LSD, because he was just like mind controlling them. Because we'll get into the LSD and the speed and how Manson effectively uses super sophisticated mind control techniques with LSD suggestibility on his followers. That just so happens to line up with exactly what these government funded scientists were doing on rats and people in the haight. It's like he's basically an expert in it. And they spent all this one-on-one time with him, so it's very apparent that he was... the experts did it on him and showed him how to do it, without Manson knowing that they're showing him suggestibility. So it's this like 1, 2, 3.
So what was the difference between the LSD and the speed, and why he wanted his followers to only do LSD and not speed there?
Because here we go. David Smith, the scientist, never even got a PhD in pharmacology, only a 2-year. And then he went to the haight behind federal and private funding for his research. This is where the drugs come in. It surprised his colleagues, and he was reluctant to admit it. David Smith published his research he found on mice with these drugs, and it made him popular. A brief article in the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs talks about it. He injected 16 mice in close quarters and found only dismembered body parts and blood would be left behind. So he found that mice injected with LSD in close quarters would encourage violence.
Oh, fuck.
And they would murder each other. They would form tiers of like dominant males that would rape male and female. But it was the close quarters and the LSD that suggested the violence, because he would put LSD first. And then he would give them speed, which would make them violent. So there was like this study of the order of the drugs and how confinement and suggestibility will get this behavior. But his research was based upon Eugene Schofield, informally connected. He never mentioned this guy in his research, but it's like a continuation, because before, Eugene Schofield didn't use drugs. This was like in 56, 46. Hold on. Wrong name. Eugene Schofield was a co-worker with Smith. He said they injected LSD before amphetamines and made him more suggestive. And suggestibility was the major part of LSD. It was John Calhoun in 46 who, quote, unquote, coined the term behavioral sink, because he didn't use drugs, John Calhoun. He just put him in confined quarters. The outcome, a behavioral sink is the outcome of any behavioral process that collects animals together in an unusually great number, aggravating all forms of pathology that can be found within the group. Calhoun went big in the 60s because he explained the increase of violence in ghettos and crowded areas with his mice research, not involving drugs, only confinement. But his quote of how they acted, it was like unfrenzied bouts of frenzied attacks of rage or something, what these mice would do. But they were hypersexualized rats that stalked and raped the other rats.
And this is while they're on both LSD and speed?
No, this was Calhoun's research in 46 without drugs.
Without drugs, just
confinement
close
alone.
Quarters. They're raping each other. They're killing
violence.
each other. Yep. Anytime you close the quarters, like, all right. So
now you can get into the conspiracies about driving people out of rural areas into close quarter big cities.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about.
Yeah. Where was I? So Calhoun's research kind of picked up with Dave Smith, who used the drugs and found a deeper level of mind control.
So, and he used the combination of LSD and speed and close quarters and suggestibility to control these rats.
Yeah, make them super violent. They just fuck each other up. They rape each other. Murder, infanticide, where they just murder babies.
So he found the violence buttons on in the psychology of rats that he figured out how to push, and noticed as he's walking by the haight-ashbury clinic, like, hey, you know what? These people are acting a little bit like the rats act that I see in the lab.
That's what the whole haight-ashbury clinic was a government-funded, let's transfer this up a scale to humans. And let's also use it to dismiss the hippie movement and make it look bad. Because remember last episode in Carolture, I talked about in 1925, they did it with the Orientals and heroin and opium. They started depicted as like drug users, but they were really peaceful people. And it like allowed the law to crack down. Like the way movies depicted it ultimately helps the law to crack down. So crazy. So all the files were like missing. Hold on, not the files. Yeah, the files were stolen about his study. Roger Smith joined the HAFMC to start his ARP. Forgot what that means. But that was the transition from rats to people, his ARP. I forgot what that means.
It's all right.
Yeah, Roger Smith, the legal guy, the PO, did the ARP in conjunction with David Smith doing the HAFMC. And then they joined forces. Roger Smith was the legal stepping up to people and the whole, we take care of the law so they don't come around here. And then David Smith was like, great, we're going to make these motherfuckers violent. Because we're going to dose up the haight-ashbury with LSD, and then the speed's going to come later and destroy it with the speed scene.
They're working hand in hand.
Yeah. And John Calhoun even predicted, like, he was the only scientist worldwide that was might be making the wrong name. Only scientist worldwide to even talk about the new drug LSD, and predicted it taking over in Bohemian quarters in the same way it wound up taking over in Bohemian quarters of San Francisco, which is like artistic.
Right.
Hippie stuff. So like there was like predictions and narratives of this coming out from these guys that built the foundation scientifically to then run this plan on people through the haight-ashbury, the summer of love.
It makes sense. I mean, it falls in line with kind of the, like I said, I think all of this was a sub-project of MK Ultra.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No records can be found on the clinical research of Roger Smith. They were stolen from the HAMC just hours after the murders. Nothing else went missing from the HAFMC.
That's not suspect at all.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here.
A string of multiple articles from different clinicians from the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, which was David Smith's, the scientist's journal, are still around on the long-term effects of LSD and amphetamines. Whether a dramatic drug-induced experience would have lasting effects on the individual's personality. Another observance that frustration.
Or you didn't state that. He just has papers on whether it does or doesn't.
Yeah, just papers. It was just what the journal was talking about.
Got you.
But that's what they were studying. Like, can we change people's personalities? I guess is the point there.
Yeah.
They also observed that frustration and anger is what originally led people to LSD in the first place, not the whole positive thing. So they would put the subject under emotional pressure, and then they would induce images and sensations of anger or hate magnified into nightmarish proportions while they're under LSD.
That seems like a horrifying experience.
Yeah, David Smith coined it psychedelic syndrome, referring to this phenomena. Groups of people would create a chronic LSD state in which they would like feed off each other and like change their realities based on each other's newfound epiphanies. So you can feel like some group psychosis.
Let's all take LSD together and then we'll just live in this LSD land.
Yeah. Yeah, certain individuals using it regularly could experience a dramatic orientation to mysticism in people with pre-psychotic personalities. So those kind of people, LSD precipitated long-term psychological disorder, usually depressive reaction or schizophrenic reaction. After the murders, when Manson was arrested, David Smith came out and wrote, Manson could be diagnosed probably as ambulatory schizophrenic. And David Smith claimed Roger knew from day one that Manson was schizo. So they knew from day one he had all the tendencies you need to create the perfect mouse under the LSD thing.
And so Manson was just a little pawn in their experimental game to see how far they could push someone's mental state.
Yeah. So it kind of gets into, isn't this crazy, man?
It's fucking wild that our government did any of this stuff back in the, and it's not that long ago, right? The 60s. It is a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. You know what I mean? Like our parents were alive back then. You know what I mean?
What do you think is going on? Yeah, they were alive back then.
That's the thing. I think we're so close to it. Like whatever is going on right now, we don't really know. Like we can look for signs of it here and there, but you know, it's like this. It's one of the things where when you get a far enough distance away from it, then you can actually look back and start to put the pieces together and see, like, you know what, that's some really shady shit our government was doing back then.
Back then, like, what are they doing now with today's technology?
That's what I'm saying. Like, who knows?
I saw something on Twitter that was trending. It was AOC liar.
Okay.
And every post was a picture of a dog and somebody going, look at my cute dog, hashtag AOC liar. And there was nothing about the truth of what happened at the Capitol. It was just a flood of these random, like...
So what was the truth that happened? I know she claimed that she feared for her life.
She was in a building like blocks away because the Capitol's here and where her offices is actually here. And like, you know, the riot was here. So it was like, it was just like a half truth. And then the media,
like one of those Jesse Smollett type of things. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I wanna play the victim so bad that I'm gonna
Yeah.
just claim I feared for my life at this.
And Jimmy Dore makes a great point because she just totally fucked up with missing the force of the vote because they could have held out on voting Nancy Pelosi as the seat or whatever, the chair, until she gives Medicare for all and bigger stimuluses. They could have did that, but they didn't. And now she's covering and changing the story by being this victim. Now everyone loves her again, even though she just helped fuck everybody and they had the power in their hands. But what I'm saying is, I forgot what I was saying. What was I
Well,
saying?
you're saying that on Twitter, when you look up AOC
Yeah, so
liar,
it was a bunch
that
of bot
it's just a bunch
posts.
of
They
yeah.
flooded it, so there was nothing there. When you go see it, you don't find any of the truth. They just start fucking flooding it. Because on The Dissident, I watched it, that documentary about Saudi Arabia and Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist, being
I haven't
killed.
watched it yet. Actually, you got to pay for it, but yeah, I need to go watch it soon.
Rent it for $5 on Amazon.
I know.
Just went
I
to.
know. I need to.
So they did that on Twitter when things would go trending, bots would flood it with other irrelevant things. And I was like, holy shit, I just saw that happen.
So that's
Yeah,
what they're doing. There you go. That's what they're doing right there.
yeah, that's what they're doing these days. That's how they're working these days.
They're
Hey,
basically controlling the public's how do I say this?
perception of reality,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
curate reality.
They're curating reality because, I mean, it's not like they have to go invent some wild technology to disseminate their propaganda. I mean, you can't see it, but I'm just holding up my fucking phone. I mean, everyone is so addicted to this shit. This is what forms your reality around you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
once if they are able to control that, and they're able to control the social networks, then they can control our reality.
Well said.
So
This is a good time for me to go fill up my coffee and take a pee.
yeah, how much more you got? I do need to end it sometime kind of soon, but
I'm actually close to the end, so let's just keep going. I'll edit
you,
this out.
you go fill your coffee. Go fill your coffee.
It's just so much information. I kind of just have to read my
Well,
paraphrase.
I get it. I mean, the dude. I mean, dude, think about it. This guy took 20 years to research and get all these details and condense it down into a book. And I mean, I listened to him talk about it for 3 hours on Rogan's podcast. Whenever, and that's how a lot of us found out about it. And yeah, even that just kind of scratches. Like, I still didn't get the full picture of what was. I'm getting a better picture of what actually happened and what he discovered from that in writing that book from you. Just kind of reading through your paraphrased paragraphs there than I did from him. So don't feel bad, man. I mean, it's a shitload of information. Like I said, this guy spent 20 years doing research on this particular subject. Drawing the lines between all the names and all the characters involved in it. So I get it. It's all good. Okay, yeah.
My voice like feels tight right now. Like it's not like the air is not flowing. So I feel like the way it sounds is as uncomfortable as it feels talking. Because you got a good radio voice. Your voice flows good. Mine feels like a.
You sound fine, bro.
Okay.
You sound fine.
Okay.
You're in your head so much.
Okay, good. I won't worry about it.
Yeah,
so there's this weird guy. There's this weird guy, Dr. Joylin West.
Joylin West. All right. So where's he come into play at? So we have Dave Smith, who is a doctor, and then we have Dr.
Roger Smith, who is the legal guy.
Roger Smith, legal guy.
John Calhoun, who started the rat research. David Smith, who picked it up and turned it into basically what I mean. Manson is the product of a perfectly executed
experiment.
Right? Yeah, and that's what they were
and
doing.
And who's this other
haight-ashbury clinic?
Yeah, who's this other doctor?
He came in 1977. Maybe you mentioned him last week. He conducted behavioral control experiments. Dr. Louis Joylin West, Jolly West, is his name. And hypnosis on Americans without their consent. The Korean War, when the soldiers would come back, this was the guy. Allegation in 1977 on the New York Times of him conducting these experiments made it big. So that story kind of blew up. I think that's whenever MK Ultra
Well, the MK Ultra story got broken in '74 by Seymour Hersh from the New York Times. Then they formed the Rockefeller Commission to look into all of those abuses. Um, and that probably took place, I don't have a time frame on that, but probably sometime in '77, if I'm not mistaken, around that time frame. So that's when all this stuff could have got broken. So what was that guy's name again?
Louis Joylan West, Jolly West. But he was the guy that was deprogramming guys. And he was linked with Charlton Heston and MLK Jr. for civil rights activism. But at the same time, infringing on the rights of others in prison, experimenting. Because his detractors alleged that he conducted experiments on prisoners in Oklahoma and Texas. But he was the guy that examined Jack Ruby right before Ruby was to testify. Jolly examined him alone in a jail cell and came out reporting he suffered an acute psychotic break. And then Ruby gave his fucked up testimony where they were like, oh, look, he's crazy. He can never explain why he killed Oswald. But Joylan West accepted office at the Haight-Ashbury Clinic. So he was there too.
Okay. Yeah, that is sketchy.
Yeah, he moved to San Francisco in '67 to study LSD and hippies. He got a grant from the government, took a sabbatical from the University of Oklahoma to pursue a fellowship at Stanford, but there's no record of him at Stanford. He wrote a chapter about LSD in a '67 psychiatry textbook called Hallucinogens. This is one of those guys warning students of a remarkable substance making its way through college campuses across the country. So Jolly West was the guy that was like predicting it, like, hey, he quoted Bohemian Quarters, and that's like what that is. He had predicted the LSD cults springing up. He spoke about its ability to dissolve the ego, bring estranged youth together out of reality. The exact behavior that would begin happening after. His '65 paper, Dangers of Hypnosis, noted that certain individuals are able to hypnotize their followers to incite violence. This was contrary to the science of the times, but West had predicted people become labile, which is like you can have your morals changed, under hypnosis. He predicted that, where you can warp their moral codes, and like science at the time was like, no, you can't. Jolly was the guy that said, yes, you can. Subjects would have no memory of their actions afterward. When he arrived in Haight-Ashbury, he was the only scientist worldwide who predicted such LSD cults to emerge. How would he know that? His published writing like never really talks about the experiments he did, but in San Francisco he would experiment like a shit ton more. After working at the clinic for a brief period at HAFMC, he opened an old Victorian house to do undercover studies of people. He described this as a laboratory disguised as a hippie crash pad, decorations and everything. He put 6 students in there, told them to dress like hippies and lure in people. He opened the pad in June '67 at the beginning of the Summer of Love, and it was funded by the Foundation's Fund for Research, Inc., later shown to be a CIA seed. Tom O'Neill did.
Whoa.
I'm sure he's got the documents. And then there's a guy named George White, a spy a few years earlier. He set up a system of prostitutes to entice men where they would like drink martinis laced with acid.
This is Operation Midnight Climax, yeah.
Yeah. So this is like these guys connecting to this bigger picture of MK Ultra. Like the Manson murders is not this random thing that happened because
it's all part of the MK Ultra network. Like I said, it's a sub project of MK Ultra. It has to be.
It's the government doing mind control experiments and learning how to get people to do this, like the mass shootings and all this crazy stuff that happens today. With this in context, and it makes me wonder, like, is MK Ultra? They got what they wanted. Now they're just running the game plan. And they're just because
so supposedly it ended, right? So after the government did the Rockefeller Commission, they looked into it. They said we'll never allow this to happen again, ever. But maybe not. So I kind of went on a small tangent when doing my MK Ultra research, and I don't know how true this is, but it's not really related to LSD. So. You know the Atari game Battlezone that came out? It came out in November of 1980, right? So this is well after MK Ultra had been exposed and supposedly dissolved and everything. Well, kind of an unexpected byproduct of Atari releasing that game. Well, just to tell you what Battlezone was, it was the very first person shooter tank combat arcade game from Atari. The player basically controls a tank, which is attacked by other tanks and missiles, and it was considered to be the first big 3D success. And I believe it was, you wore these like goggles where that displayed the game and everything. So the military got interested in it. So they're like, hey, we could train soldiers in a very inexpensive way without using live rounds. So they actually were interested in exploring ways in which they could maybe have Atari, or the creator of the Battle Zone game, create a game that the U.S. military could use. So this guy named Ed Robert, he was the one who originally created the game. They basically employed him to make their version of a tank trainer. I forget what the name of it was actually called. And around the same time, they had this game that popped up in Portland, Oregon, in arcade, all around, just in Portland, all around arcades in that time. It was called Polybius. And they were like, they have pictures of this game and everything. And supposedly, anyone who played this game got extremely addicted to it. And it had the effects of amnesia, insomnia, nightmares, hallucinations, and in some cases, even suicide. So the conspiracy is that they basically created this game as part of like a subshoot of MK Ultra, and did an experiment in Portland, Oregon in '81, which is a year after that Battlezone game came out, of using video games as a mind control device in order to induce certain effects in humans. So that's the conspiracy. I didn't look super deep into it, and it's kind of like an urban legend in the area. But I thought that was kind of interesting. That in doing my research for MK Ultra, that's one of the things that, because I even looked up. It's like, all right, what evidence can I find of MK Ultra still going on today?
Is that game still available? Like, dude, is that in the App Store? Dude, what if they make a re-release of that? Oh, shit. Polybius re-released for iPhone and Android. Everywhere you get games.
I probably did a shit job explaining that. Let me see if I can just pull the Wikipedia page up of it.
Polybius. Dude, it's like Skyrim. So addictive.
Well, I mean,
I never wanted to go... I kind of went crazy with Skyrim. I wanted to wear handmade armor and shoot everything with a bow and arrow, but...
You know what I just got addicted to? That so I got the new UFC game just to start, so I could play it as Kettlebell Killer and talk shit on my streams that way, in Kettlebell Killer character. But now I'm kind of addicted to it. Like I just started playing.
Really?
It's pretty fun. I don't know. Like I enjoy it. All right, so this is it right here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
That's what the cabinet looked, or that's a mock-up of the cabinet apparently.
What does Polybius mean? What's the meaning of the word?
The name of a classical Greek historian born in Arcadia, who is known for his assertion that historians should never report what they cannot verify through interviews with witnesses.
Does Arcadia have any connection to arcade with this game being an arcade game?
I don't know, maybe.
Like, what is the deeper thread there? Seems like something. Name.
I mean, to me, the name is kind of interesting, right? And what it means, that considering that he was a historian who should never report what they cannot verify through interviews with witnesses. If I was trying to create a secret government psyop program that I wanted to be able to continue to deny, that's pretty interesting, right? Because they've never been able to substantiate that this was a real thing that took place.
Yeah, because if there are any witnesses, their memories have been erased through the suggestibility of LSD and the mind control
So yeah, so this states, the story tells of an unheard of new arcade game appearing in several suburbs of Portland, Oregon, something of a rarity at the time. The game was described as proving popular to the point of addiction, with lines forming around the machines, often resulting in fighting over who would play next. The legend describes how the machines were visited by men in black who collected unknown data from the machines, allegedly testing responses to the game's psychoactive effects. Players supposedly suffered from a series of unpleasant side effects, including amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and hallucinations.
What the fuck?
Approximately 1 month after its supposed release in 1981, Polybius is said to have disappeared without a trace.
Just like all the files.
Yep, the company named in most accounts of the game is Sindosloshen. The word is described by Brian Dunning as not quite idiomatic German, a word constructed outside the norms of German language usage and grammar, meaning sense delete, as in like one of your five senses, sense delete, or sensory deprivation.
What? That's the name of Schauschling-Blogen, the company that made it?
Sinenschlossen. Yep.
That's what it means?
Yeah.
Sense delete. Whoa,
or
man.
sensory deprivation.
Holy shoot.
Let's see if
whoa,
interesting in here.
The name of the company that made the game.
The company.
Whoa.
So hold on. So the name of the company name in most accounts of the game. Let's see where this source is from. So
what is the game itself? Is it shooting? Is it role playing? Is it
let me see.
Random puzzle pattern game?
I'm not reading this whole fucking thing on air. I don't know. That's I wish I could. I wish I knew.
Dude, we got to get this game.
Apparently, it's sitting in some warehouse somewhere.
Let's write a song and call it Polybius.
I'm down.
Dude, let's rename Death of Skepsis Polybius.
I'm down.
All right, what do you got there?
I was just trying to do some more reading to see if I could find what the game was based on.
Polybius. That's badass.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it doesn't even state. It just states that it's super addictive and had a bunch of effects. So, anyway, go look it up, folks. Polybius. Thought that was interesting. Maybe it's more evidence that MK Ultra is still around, and they're just experimenting on different ways other than LSD to control our minds.
And video games. You got to wonder, the video games out now.
Well, I mean, to be honest, like social media controls our minds well enough with algorithms to the point where, like, this is fucking old technology now. They don't need this shit anymore. So,
the last thing is that guy that was setting up seducing men to get drunk on LSD. He was watching on the other side of a window. He liked it so much he installed a bathroom and a martini bar so he didn't have to leave. And he wrote to his CI handler. This gets good.
You're talking about George White, right? He was.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I have notes about him. He was a creep.
Yeah, he was trying to figure out if he could extract.
Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with sanction and blessing of the all highest?
Yeah, pretty good stuff, Beretta. That dude's fucked up.
That dude is fucked. That was a quote from him, by the way, guys.
Yeah, so that was his experiment, trying to get like private information. Jolly West also conducted experiments for the hate. He infiltrated teen gangs, tried to effect a change to their morale, religious, and political matter. That project was titled Mass Conversion and received funding from Sidney Gottlieb, the head of CIA's MK Ultra experiment. There you go, Jesse. It all starts with Sidney Gottlieb giving money to Jolly West to study gangs and violence.
All under head of CIA Dulles.
Yeah, and then he joined HAFMC with David Smith, who had the John Calhoun rat studies, and they tag teamed it with Roger Smith taking care of the law, and Manson was their guy. These murders happened. They almost started a race war. I mean, they're still trying to start a race war today with the way they present atrocious acts to the public,
What
right?
what would
Well,
be the point of that of initiating a race war? Is it a
well,
population control? Is it about
to control,
being able to
to crack
crack?
down, to use police law to crack down on all the violence, and that's what they did with the Chinese because it allowed the cops to come in and start deporting people because now they had right to search them because the whole public was afraid of the Chinese and the opium users when it
Mm,
was all spun off bullshit. So you get something like this to happen, and the Manson murders, and you associate it at the trial and all in the media with hippies and LSD, and you leave out the whole part that these were studies involving speed and suggestibility also, and those murders, it connects to COINTELPRO. Why would they do it? Because COINTELPRO is that program to infiltrate groups and get them to fight with each other. Or Chaos was the group that would
yeah,
intentionally set them up so they would fight and you let nature take its course. So the powers that be are running these game plans to get us to fight with each other without them touching us. And it's hard to get people to snap out of it because it sounds so crazy. But it's
yeah.
not, because it works just like
I
this.
mean, this was a very illuminating episode for me in getting all the details of that. Well, not all the details, but a lot more details of Tom O'Neill's book and that
Yeah.
involvement. I mean, there's just a lot of, and unfortunately, none of this shit is necessarily provable, right? It is all theory, but when you start looking at all of the evidence together and don't exclude pieces of evidence like was done in the original Helter Skelter trials, obviously excluded evidence and witnesses, it starts to make sense as to why they would do this, why they would want to cover it up, and even the programs that were in play at the time when all this was going down, MK
Hmm.
Ultra. So
And you get into like, I'm into rituals and them running rituals and spells on the masses through popular entertainment, mainly like the Super Bowl party and things like that, Super Bowl halftime show. And if they're doing these deep experiments in the 60s and 70s about human mind, ego dissolving mind control, it's like you said, it's not necessarily provable, but there's so much there that you can't mock the idea if somebody comes out and says they're just doing rituals to hypnotize the masses so they can start a race war while nobody pays attention to the endless wars in the Middle East, which are based off the same thing. Like,
yeah, it's not like at least consider it a possibility. Don't shoot it down as craziness so quick. You know what? That way you're prepared for whatever comes your way.
yeah, and if the helter skelter thing kicked off and a race war did start, that's great for law enforcement and the powers that be because they're trying to crack down on the law. And that's what a lot of people don't believe. They're like, they're not trying to control everybody. It's like they are, and I think that's what one of the goals would be of them to spin the helter skelter story and get a race war started. Maybe using Manson to start it by provoking the Black Panthers and putting the hippies on the other side of the block of a Black Panther meeting, and
Right. Like why the fuck is this getting blamed on us? We're gonna really kill some people now and show
like
you what the fuck is up.
yeah, like undercover agents organized the hippie movement to meet at 36 and Laurel, and the undercover agents, they did that because they know Black Panthers are meeting at 37th and Laurel, so they just, and then the law can crack down because of violence, and you get, I guess what they, conspiratorially speaking, would have gotten out of that race war that would happen is what they got now with COVID, which is just cracking down. And it's what they got after 9/11 was cracking down. It's like all these events that happen where the public, they manufacture consent from the public so they can then push in these laws, um, monitor and arrest people. They get more prison labor. They get more funding for their wars. So all these big companies like Lockheed Martin um, make a shit ton of money, and all the politicians have stock, so they get rich, and all the banks like crash our market and increase the gap, and the banks get rich, and it's all because we were like, dude, terrorists and the virus, bro.
Yeah, protect us, big daddy government.
Comes down to this consent that is manufactured off of these events that are real. People die, shit happens, but there's more to the story, and it's usually suggestive of foul play by the government or compliance with the government, you know. But
Yep.
people aren't awake, so they buy the official story, which is just over here. It's like, it's not the government, it's crazy hippies. It's not the government, it's redneck Trump supporters with guns. It's not the government, it's right-wing domestic terrorists and their Reddit conspiracies.
Very well articulated. Very well said.
Thank you.
You definitely.
One good thing said. I did my best stumbling through these paragraphs, but you know,
No, dude, you did fine.
This is the way the rat wheel works. Shout out to Tom O'Neill. I didn't give away the book. This is like 2 chapters, and I was like, I got it.
I have to go read it now.
Fucking awesome book. It's a big book. There's a lot in there.
I do have to go read it.
Yeah, it's great.
Fuck yeah, man. Good breakdown.
MK Ultra.
MK Ultra, that puts a bow on it. So, no, I mean, not necessarily. It's probably still going on today.
Oh yeah,
as we have alluded to, and we'll continue to look for evidence of that as we go along. And if you guys, as fans of the podcast, come across stories that you think are shady, or you think that we should maybe investigate or dig into more, or if we're missing something, send it our way. Let us know.
If you were at the Vegas shooting and you survived and you heard multiple shots, I want to know.
Dylan wants to. Yeah, I want to know too. I'd be fascinating to talk to someone. I mean, I understand it could be a horrific event and a horrific thing to bring up for somebody. So don't want to speak too lightly about that. But hey, if you were there and you think some multiple shooters were involved, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So you have anything else on this that you want to cover?
No, that's it. But that was perfect timing when you said MK Ultra. And I was reading this book. I said, "Oh my God, this is MK Ultra right here. This is how it works."
Definitely lines up like with MK Ultra, and you have some of the same players involved.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's not necessarily, or I said it's not necessarily provable, but there's a lot of evidence there that alludes to the fact that the government was definitely pulling some shady shit when it comes to the Manson murders, because we know the government was doing shady shit similar to that at the same time frame with similar substances and similar players involved.
One more thing, there was a case of a guy that at this time, I think it was Roger West, the parole officer. He was the parole officer or the psychiatrist, the guy that examined Jack Ruby. One of those guys I mentioned earlier. He was the psychiatrist that examined this guy. So he's an army guy, family. There's a bar. It was at night, and there was construction like next door. And there was a family at the bar that left their kid in the car or something so they could party. They couldn't find their kid. And then that army guy came stumbling out of the construction site, like naked and like full of blood. And then the baby was dead. And he had no recollection of anything. And he was examined by like that same guy that was mentioned earlier. So that case is like some side case, but it connects back to these same guys. There's like all these, you know, if you dig in it,
shit,
like
they probably dosed that dude with LSD and had him kill a child.
Exactly. That's the conspiracy behind it, because it connects back to these guys that were doing this.
They were dosing random people in bars like that too.
Yeah, I mean, and they were... Yeah, like that's what they did, was dose them up. These people have no... Look, dude, it's undercover agents with expert science behind them and government funding with a plan. Let's go to a bar and just like get this guy, like that. It's so easy. The guy has no idea these are agents mind controlling me. It's so easy if you're the agents just to go like,
I'm gonna slip some LSD in his drink. Hey, buddy, come talk to me for a little bit. You know
Yeah.
you know that kid in the car that you see outside? That thing is a demon. You need to kill it. You know, or some whatever the fuck they said.
Connected to your past. I
Right.
think that guy had sexual issues with there was something
That's fucking sick.
he
You
had
can't
like a
talk about this
trauma.
shit.
He had a trauma past or something. That's what it was. That was likely that they isolated him, and just like you said, like bring up his past and insert it. He had
I
like a
can't.
past, but it's
That's a,
fucked up. Yeah, it's super
that shit
disturbing, man.
angers me. Your shit
Yeah.
like that. I mean, the people that brought their baby to a bar and left it in the car where they're in that's kind of fucking weird too. But that's a really fucked up thing to do. I remember hearing about that on the podcast. I remember hearing Tom O'Neill tell that story, and that's really fucked up.
Super fucked up.
So yeah, that's what our government is capable of, folks.
That's what they're capable of.
To think that they've just stopped all of a sudden.
Yeah, they just stopped.
I don't know. I guess we are crazy conspiracy theorists for thinking that.
No files on record.
Yep.
And I told my grandparents, my grandma likes to know what books I'm reading and stuff sometimes. I just told her I was reading this. I told her it kind of upends the Helter Skelter story. And she was like, oh, no way, wow. And I was like, wow, I guess a lot of people don't realize they believe Helter Skelter. It's like in the back of their mind, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I don't know. I don't believe it anymore.
Yeah. I never really knew about it until I read this book.
A little bit about it through movies and shit.
So, good episode. Any updates with Golgothan? How's the record label search going?
We put our offer back to the bigger label that we had an offer from, and we're just waiting to hear back. So we're just kind of negotiating. I don't know, like we want to sign, but we're not going to give up a bunch of creative control or anything like that. Just to get signed. Yeah. We don't need a label for much, to be honest. We do all of our own artwork, we do all of our own videos, we do all of our own recording. We really just need it for marketing and fronting money for merch and shit like that, more or less, and manage, and if we do happen to go on tour,
get some money.
That's not happening anytime soon. So I don't know. We're not in a big rush. And I told the guys that, and I said, I'm not going to just sign some shit that we're not 100% happy with just because we got an offer. I'd rather renegotiate and clarify things in the contract. The dude we're talking with is foreign. So I want to make sure that there was nothing lost in the translation between English and his native language in the legal contract that, anyway, we just want to clarify some things that were in the contract. So we're still in talks. We're still doing shit though. Like we have a kind of separate from the album. We have a cover that we did. That'll be cool. That we're gonna release.
A heavy metal cover.
Yeah, I guess a death metal cover, but yeah, it's a cover of a King Diamond song. So
okay, I haven't heard of King Diamond. Should I know who that is?
Big '80s artist.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, not that you should have heard of him, but he's pretty huge. I'll tell you what song offline, and that way you can go check it out and see what the original sounds like.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have that coming out pretty soon, and we just recorded a video for that. We have a music video from our last EP that we're finishing up. So yeah, we always have content going on. I'm probably going to do some streaming tonight if you want to catch
Kettlebell Killer.
Not Kettlebell Killer. I'm just gonna be streaming from my house, doing some PlayStation. Just because I normally do Kettlebell Killer streams on Tuesday, but Eddie, because he is unavailable any other day of the week this week, so I'm doing it tonight to make up for that. And so I'm just gonna be streaming some video games from my house.
What game?
I don't know yet, man. I was thinking about just doing. So I have this survival game I've been playing on the past couple streams called Ark. It's okay. I was thinking about either doing that or maybe doing some UFC if I could get better at it.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll decide before the stream here in a couple hours and let you know.
Yeah, I don't have a car, so I'm home. Let me know. I'll turn it on my fucking TV.
Cool. I'll let you know, man. So, anything new going on with you?
I'm finishing up the Death of Skepsis tabs today, and getting ready to finish the Son of a Gun record. Son of a Gun, baby. And I'm gonna set up and start practicing drums. I'm trying to get back to the instruments and get off the damn computer so much. Editing shit, but whatever. Death of Skepsis tabs are good. You don't have all of them yet. I haven't sent all of them. You only have like the 5 or 6 I sent a while back. I got all of our old ones, 12, and I got all of the new ones, which there were repeat parts in the new ones that wound up, like the big section from this song, Tremoleta's voice, was actually in one of these new songs. So like I had to delete sections and then slide it together and then combine like the other one into one song.
You had to do some composing.
Yeah, and amalgamating and combining. And Sean had like a couple extra stray rhythms, like a new intro and then another new intro. Super cool stuff that I put together and then like at the end of one song. So we got 8 new songs.
That's fucking crazy. From
the old DOS days, new ones that you've never heard anything from them.
That's crazy.
Plus a new rhythm intro I don't know where to put. Plus Precipice that I did those drums for. It's really wacky. Plus Vulture Stone. And so we got like 10 new ones sitting
That's
there.
crazy.
When I finish, I'm gonna send you everything.
It's gonna be. I'm gonna have fucking 2 new albums out in the past couple of years with Go Gotham and Jesus Christ. It's a lot of content.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of Death of Skepsis.
A lot of content, folks.
Yep.
Well, good episode, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'll do what I can with my research, with my investigating and my journalism.
Well, I learned, like I said, I learned a lot, if nothing else. Even if the listeners didn't, fuck them. I learned a lot.
Oh, I did too, man. I'm still learning. Each day, God walks with me and helps me grow.
Hand in hand, baby.
Hand in hand. All right, man. We'll do a next episode on some wacky articles about space and politics.
I'm down. See you next Wednesday.
Yeah, man.
We'll talk about it.
Yep. I'll see you tonight on your stream.
All right. See you guys later.
Later, man.
Peace.